Today we're going to be talking about the Greater Bay Area. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of press about it, but I think today we've have two very honored, please sit down, panelists with us, who obviously see why I will basically focus them on the government side. So why is this all happening? Why is the government's vision is moving this forward? And obviously Vincent, who's on the business side, will see what are the opportunities. Now, prior to this discussion, Mr. Leung was very wanted me to open this up to the floor. So what I'm going to leave is about 10 minutes at the end of the discussion to really just get some feedback, because COI wants to bring any comments, any feedback to Beijing, because the Beijing government really wants to push this forward and make this happen in the Greater Bay Area. So on that note, what I'm going to do is, because we have 22 other countries sitting in the meeting room, I'm going to go through like literally 30 seconds of a kind of a quick snapshot of what is going on in the Greater Bay Area. And please, CY and Vincent, come in and say whatever you think is appropriate. So just to give everyone the Greater Bay Area, so that's the dot. I'll give you a better dot, actually. So this is China, if you don't know where China is. Right? Just get everyone on the same page. I'm not sure, right? Wait a minute, here we go. Guangdong province. Now what they want to do is really kind of hook up Macau, Hong Kong, and Guangdong province, so that you basically have a big metropolitan area. These are the key cities, as I said, that are kind of in the frame, where Hong Kong, Macau is based, and then obviously the 9 other cities that are in the frame. Just give you, so these are the 9 cities inside China, the 2 SAR countries, or cities, sorry. 56,000 square kilometers, 68 million people. So what does that mean? I think it's 2.5 Canadas and 3 Australias or something like that. And obviously some huge numbers in 2016, but that we're expecting to be growing exponentially. So, also we put this slide up, which was Vincent's slide, which I have more of a other slide, just to show you comparisons of other Bay Areas that we have. So this is the Great Bay Area which we had. So we got 68 million people, 56,000 square kilometers. Tokyo Bay Area, 37,000 square kilometers, 43 million people. San Francisco Bay Area, 18,000 square kilometers, 7 million people. And New York, 23 million. So this is the scope and the size of what we're dealing with. Again, this is what Vincent gave me through Hong Kong TDC, which he's also very actively involved in. Again, just shows you where a quick snapshot. Now, I'll put this back on because I want Vincent to kind of go through this. But CY, why don't we start with you?
Firstly, I would like to ask this question. On what level, in the context of China's development going forward, next 25, next 30 years, should we view the Greater Bay Area, the GBA, in the context of country's development? Where, on what level should we view this? Let us look backward a little bit. This year marks the 40th anniversary of China's reforms and opening up. Now, we've somehow sort of got used to the idea that China has always been what it is today. But actually the history of reform and opening up, and therefore all the consequential developments in the country relative to the long history of the country is actually quite short. 30 years ago, I helped the country sell its first piece of land on the mainland. And this is the part of the country outside of Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. And this was the tender document. 22nd of March, 1988. And that was the beginning of the real estate market in the mainland of China. And so real estate market in mainland China, Shanghai, Beijing, Shanghai, Wuhan, is no more than 30-year-old. I know you were asked questions about the region going forward 25 years. And 25 years is a long time in China. On GBA, Greater Bay Area, we should examine two impacts, at least two impacts. Infrastructure impact and reform impact. Infrastructure impact, I need to read because I thought a lot about this. I think it's best described as the impact of allowing things to happen physically that were not hitherto possible. So that's infrastructure impact. One piece of infrastructure that we're building is this bridge, which I'll describe a bit more later, that will allow us to drive to Macau. And that will provide the infrastructure impact. The other impact is reform impact. And reform impact is the impact of allowing things to happen where not hitherto allowable as a matter of policies. Now, for example, we couldn't own real estate in the mainland China. No one could, except the state and collectives, 31 years ago. We couldn't hire and fire as employees, and we couldn't determine wage levels of employees before reforms. And between these two impacts, in my view, particularly going forward in the GBA, reform impact is going to be bigger than infrastructure impact. And much of the reforms that succeeded as a result of Guangdong, which is where the mainland GBA cities are, they're a result of Guangdong opening up to Hong Kong and taking a leave out of Hong Kong's practices and experiences, and also Hong Kong's economic system. So GBA, if I could just leave this one thought with you for the time being, GBA is about opening up to Hong Kong, and it's about more reforms. It's not just about infrastructure going in, it's about opening up to Hong Kong in policy terms as well, and reforms. I'll come back to this later. Now, a few quick slides. This is my favorite satellite photograph, one taken by an American satellite, by the way. The 11 dots are the 11 cities that make up the GBA. At first glance, thank you. At first glance, you see that this is a huge conurbation. Now, land economists and planners should take an interest in this. And this is the biggest conurbation in the world, and the densest conurbation as well. And all happened in the last 40 years, with little Hong Kong dangling down the belly of the country, and therefore this region. Before reform started 40 years ago, cities on the west bank of the bay had higher GDP per capita than cities such as Shenzhen and Dongguan, which had nothing to offer. This kind of season reminds us of Lai Chi from Shenzhen and Dongguan, because these two places are quite hilly, but they didn't have much else to offer. But it had the benefit, as soon as reform started and the open door policy started, it had the benefit of being contiguous to Hong Kong, and therefore production lines moved one after another, factories moved one after another from Hong Kong to Shenzhen and to Dongguan. And now, after 40 years, Shenzhen is the city that has the highest GDP per capita in the mainland of China, not Shanghai, not Beijing. Shenzhen has the highest GDP per capita amongst all 600 cities in the country except Hong Kong, Macau. And it has a population over 10 million people, and the boundary between Hong Kong and Shenzhen is literally 45 minutes driving from here. So that's how close it is. It's a sort of big science and technology city. This part, which is essentially the East Bank, is now highly developed, and opportunities now lie on the West Bank. But to get to the West Bank, we need these infrastructure. Therefore, as soon as these new infrastructure are in place, the infrastructure impact on the development of the region. The well-known Hong Kong, Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, one of the longest of its kind in the world, to be open before the end of this year. So we could drive physically from Hong Kong to Macau or to Zhuhai, and from Zhuhai to this part of the province. This is being built, 24 kilometers long. It's called Shenzhen-Zhongshan Bridge. It costs 42 billion renminbi, which is a lot of money. This is the existing bridge. The only fixed crossing at the moment between the East Bank and the West Bank is chock-a-block. And this is the fourth one, which is being built, and that will be ready before the end of this year. This one will be ready by 2024. Now, once this mega bridge is open to traffic before the end of this year, then the whole of the West Bank will be accessible from Hong Kong by car. On the 1st of July last year, the signing of the framework agreement for the development of the GBA was actually witnessed by none other than the President himself. Now, why is it so important? To avoid duplication investments and efforts, to enhance synergy, and to facilitate easier flow of human resources, goods, capital, and information. I don't know what the C means, but amongst the 9 cities, they have always been doing this, between cities and among them on the mainland of China. That's easy too, amongst the mainland cities. But once you throw Macau and Hong Kong in, particularly Hong Kong, which practices the 2 systems within one country with a high degree of autonomy, once you throw Hong Kong to the formula and say, hey, how do we achieve better, doing this, how do we achieve better synergy and avoid duplication investments and efforts, and to facilitate easier flow of human resources, once you throw Hong Kong to the formula, it becomes a bit of a challenge. And this is where we need imagination, and we need boldness in carrying out more reforms. Unlike other Bay Area cities, between us and the mainland GBA cities, we practice the other system, 1 country, 2 systems, and we have a different customs jurisdiction. I'll give you some actual examples later. Heavy infrastructure investments, express rail link, Hong Kong, Macau, Zhuhai Bridge, Liantang, Hengyunwei crossing. And this is probably the best kept secret in Hong Kong. No one knows that we've been stealthily, secretly building this new highway that takes Hong Kong traffic to the northeastern part of the Guangdong province through Huizhou and then to Fujian province. We've been doing it for years and no one seems to know about it. And this new road network actually incorporates the longest road tunnel in Hong Kong. It's 4.4 kilometers long and no one knows about it. This will be the 7th crossing, the 7th border crossing between Hong Kong and Shenzhen. We'll be ready in about 6 to 9 months. That kind of capacity. Now, let's look at this again. Once we have this new crossing, which I just mentioned, between us and Shenzhen, we have this new bridge, and then we have a new express rail taking people from high-speed rail from Tsim Sha Tsui to connect us to the country's high-speed rail network. Starting from Hong Kong, using Hong Kong as a base, you could physically access 67 million potential customers within a matter of an hour and a half. And this is the impact. This is the infrastructure impact. And I also want to bring in reform impact. What is reform impact? At the moment, it is a privilege to be able to drive one's car via one of the 6 existing road crossings into the mainland. And you need to have a mainland license plate. You don't need a US license plate driving from Canada to the US or vice versa. You don't need a Malaysian license plate driving from Singapore to Malaysia, vice versa. Why do we need, and on a very restrictive basis, a mainland license plate for Hong Kong vehicles to be driven across, say, the bridge to the mainland? And so my proposal has been, I've been working on this for 3 or 4 years now. It's getting some traction up in Beijing, that all private vehicles in Hong Kong should be allowed to be driven across the bridge to the mainland. That's what I mean by reform. And that would provide a reform impact in addition to the infrastructure impact. So where are we now? Hong Kong will be the choice as a regional office, even for medium-sized enterprises from other countries. You need to send someone in from your head office, hire a local manager who speaks the languages, a secretary, a driver. You'll be in business, you'll be able to reach out to 67 million potential customers on a daily basis by commuting. Insofar as the preparation plan is concerned, we are at this stage of G2G working together, government to government, the central government, provincial government, Hong Kong government, and the municipal governments in the mainland, together with the Macau government. We need to deal with, for example, the question of customs clearance. We have this one country, two systems arrangement, Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. Within that principle, without doing anything to it, within that principle, what can we do to make the flows of people, capital, information, and goods easier? And this is what the governments have been working on. I believe that we should break the shackles, and then we let market forces take over. After the G2G work is done, and this should be completed within a matter of weeks, if not days, then it will be G2B or B2G. Then it will be B2B. Businesses in Hong Kong talking to governments up there, and governments up there talking to businesses in Hong Kong, businesses in Hong Kong talking to their counterparts on the mainland or in Macau, and then businesses in Hong Kong talking to the 67 potential customers. So that's how I see the stages of work going forward. I'll pause there, and then we'll have some discussion, and I'll take some questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CY. Thank you, CY. That's all very, very compelling. I mean, let's go to Vincent. Do you see dollar signs right now, big time, around this area? Maybe you can give us some insight on what your thinking is.
Raymond, I'm extremely excited about the Greater Bay Area. We have some major strength that is most unusual in other parts of the world. We have a world-class financial center, world-class technology center. We have world-class manufacturing base, and we have a lot of culture, and the market is there. And if I can give you some projection of the GDP, just based on existing growth rate of Hong Kong and the other 3 Bay Areas, within 5 years will be larger than the other 3 Bay Areas. And if you look at the per capita GDP of New York, if we can match that, this Greater Bay Area, the GDP will be equivalent to Japan. 5.4 trillion US. I think that shows the potential and the capacity. And I think right now, and I know CY is working hard on that, we just need to make sure that we will bring down the barriers between the cities. We are not a cluster of cities. We should be an integrated region. That way, I think we will really excel.
I mean, CY, I mean, it's very compelling, like you said. The story is great. But what do you see as the major hurdles of getting this executed? My business, I'm trying to align 3 departments together. I can't align 3 departments. You're trying to align 2 SARs and nine cities. I mean, it's almost like an impossible task. Maybe give us some insight.
Well, the matter is getting personal attention at the very top echelon of the central authorities, and that's reassuring. And they're taking time to make sure that this plan works, that it makes the best use of the synergy between Hong Kong and the rest of the cities. Basically, as I said, without affecting the one country, two systems arrangement, let market forces do its work by removing some of the barriers. I mean, this example of allowing Hong Kong private cars to be driven across the bridge to Guangdong is a very good example. It doesn't affect, it wouldn't affect one country, two systems arrangement at all, but it will bring out a synergy between Hong Kong and its hinterland. So it is a question of reform. It so happened that we're looking at this, the preparation of plan on the 40th anniversary of reform and open door policy. And for 40 years, Hong Kong have contributed well to the development of the region, if not the entire country. Going forward, I think Hong Kong people, I mean, most of us are business people here, but I think we need to articulate our aspirations in such a way that it's not just me, me, me. It's not just money, money, money. It is a question of how Hong Kong working together with the GBA city, other GBA cities for the benefit, the larger benefit of the region and the larger benefit of the country. I think we need a lot of articulation in that direction.
How about Vincent, as a key businessman in China, what do you see are the hurdles kind of getting this executed, implemented properly? And where would you want to see before you first put your first dollar into the whole area?
Well, I think CY was talking about this, and me. Even in Hong Kong, a lot of people think that we're the most advanced city in the Greater Bay Area, so we should be taking the lead. If we adopt that sort of mentality or attitude, then probably Guangdong would not be willing to work with us because they've been growing much faster than us, right? Shenzhen next year will be a larger GDP than Hong Kong. And I think we have to adopt the sort of mentality that let's work together and build the synergy. That way everybody will benefit. But it's easier said than done because you have three different sets of governments and everybody's thinking that we should just do it our way.
Well, CY, again, another kind of macro question. There's a lot of talk about One Belt, One Road, and obviously this is the new one, the Bay Area. Where does the Beijing government put priority on which one is more of a priority for them? And where do you see that how these should be moving forward?
Simply put, Belt and Road is an initiative for international cooperation. GBA is a regional development strategy. There's obviously a link between the two too, in that Hong Kong is the subconnector between other GBA cities and the Belt and Road economies. So Hong Kong should be busy going forward next 25 years.
Yeah. Actually, let me give you some background information to this. The Greater Bay Area was actually initiated after the introduction of the Belt and Road. In 2014, it was suggested by Shenzhen. And then in 2015, it was a policy paper from Beijing. So it's actually, at that time, Shenzhen was thinking that they can play a big role in the Belt and Road initiative. So that idea sort of developed into this Greater Bay Area. And I believe this will be a very important base for the Belt and Road initiative going forward.
Are there any questions or comments, please?
Richard Florida talked about sort of an internationally a congress of cities of some kind. Have the cities in the Bay Area formally formed some type of governance where they're beginning to cooperate? Is there a formal organization?
The effort has been, and going forward will be, supervised by a central government organ known as NDRC, National Development and Reform Commission, often known as a mini state council. One of the gentlemen sitting at the table signing on the framework agreement on the 1st of July was actually the chairman of the NDRC. The other was governor of Guangdong province. And of course, you have the Hong Kong ACR chief executive and Macau as the other chief executive. So it's that kind of organization. So it's not just a question of Hong Kong doing it with 10 other cities. It's not Hong Kong doing it with the Guangdong province. It's actually the central government doing it together with the local governments.
But actually, CY, it's actually now even raised higher because Han Zheng is now given the task of overseeing this whole Greater Bay Area development. Han Zheng is the executive vice premier in the State Council and a standing committee member of the Politburo, which is, I think, most encouraging because it seems that Beijing also knows the problems of trying to coordinate between these different government structures.
For many other regions in the world where there's this kind of potential for the Mumbai-Delhi Industrial Development Corridor or the eastern seaboard of the USA, or you think of southeastern Brazil, the connectivity between Sao Paulo and Rio, there's about 12 places around the world where the potential to have this kind of clustered regional economy is there. But for all of those places, getting organized has proved impossible. It's been impossible for the eastern seaboard of the US to really exploit high-speed rail in the way they wanted to. It's been impossible for Sao Paulo and Rio to collaborate. It's been impossible for Mumbai and Delhi to really build that industrial corridor. Is there something special about the conditions in China that means that this one will succeed? And if it does, do you think that will help the others to get their act together?
CY, let me answer this. Well, CY showed you the tender document in 1988. It shows that China is ready for accepting new ideas and changes. And it takes people like CY to get it done. I was actually on the side giving some advice as well at that time to Shanghai. But it shows that the decision is made that China will continue to open up. And that is the pledge that the president had made to the world. And I believe this Greater Bay Area has a huge commitment from the top leaders, as well as, I think, from an economic point of view, I think the president and his top team probably can see this, that this can really be also, I think, the start of the next wave of reform in China and integrating with the world. I don't know.
The Chinese political system and government structure are different from the countries I just mentioned. We're not a federal government. We have a central government that is centrist. And therefore, what Beijing says becomes the actions on a lower level or on lower levels. The Chinese government have described this as China's systemic advantage, 制度优势. At the same time, in the same breath, the Chinese government says that we are not recommending it to other countries. We know our own business, and we're doing it our way. So that's what we are seeing.
I was born in Hong Kong, so I'm so excited about this Greater Bay Area. But I also live in Shanghai almost 20 years now. So I want to hear CY and Mr. Loh's view about whether there are any plans for the Yangtze Delta area. And also in the north, how about Xiong'an and Beijing? Are there any plans? It's not just the south side. How about the middle side and the northern side?
That's you, CY. You know the national policy, I don't.
China's a big country. China needs more than one cluster of cities. China needs more than one regional development strategy. The challenge, insofar as the GBA is concerned, versus other Bay regions in the country and outside the country is really this. We want to bring out the synergy between Hong Kong and the rest of the GBA cities. And here you have two systems and three jurisdictions within the same country. And so that's different from Xiong'an, that's different from the Yangtze region. Now, the other side of this challenge coin is reward. If we are smart enough to remove or lower some of the barriers between the two systems within the same country and amongst the three customs jurisdictions, they will reap huge rewards. So life is fair. The bigger the challenge, the bigger the reward. The challenges and rewards in that regard do not apply to other regions. It's an interesting exercise. It will involve new thinking, and you will involve a new round of reforms and opening up. As I mentioned earlier on when I was on my feet, the experience, a good experience is this: by opening up to Hong Kong, sometimes as experiments in the last 40 years, you achieve reforms in the mainland, whether it's wage reform, industrial reform, real estate reform, housing reform, and so on. The experiments always started with opening up to Hong Kong, have a sort of suck-and-see experiment. If it takes hold, is successful, then it's spread to other parts of the country.
Hei-Ming, let me also maybe give you some of my observation. I believe the Yangtze Basin development plans will be announced fairly soon. And the Yangtze Delta is likely to become another Greater Bay Area. They definitely have that potential. But like CY was saying, that should be easier than trying to do the Greater Bay Area here down south, where we have different jurisdiction. And I've also been informed that Hainan Island is going to become a free port, not just a free trade zone. It's going to be a step further. So I think China is going to be opening up more, and further reforms, it's definitely on the agenda.
Opening up to Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area is, I think, very important for Hong Kong as an opportunity for people. But I think maybe it's better to let people in Hong Kong know what they will benefit from it as well, because it's obvious it is good for Hong Kong from, when you look at it from a smart city, smart region perspective. The regional development is good. But I think what Hong Kong people maybe want to hear is how some of their challenges will be addressed and what opportunities they can have besides business only. So maybe you want to address that.
I think the Greater Bay Area, I think it's going to be critically important for Hong Kong. From our business point of view, I think we should be looking to build Hong Kong satellite towns in the Greater Bay Area. In Hong Kong right now, our property price is so high that young people hasn't got a chance to even buy a decent flat. We're developing 160 square foot flat and selling for a few million. How do you live in a flat 160 square foot? 3 steps by 5 steps. Right? So I think the Greater Bay Area, I think there's so much potential there for our young people. Otherwise, I think we'll be losing all these talents to other places. Yes, but that's also very politically sensitive. A lot of young people say, why should I go and live elsewhere? I was born and raised here. It's the same political issue everywhere.
It will be very interesting for particularly land economists and sociologists to watch what might happen to population movement between Hong Kong and the mainland. Oh, by the way, one country, two systems is literally one-way traffic. Hong Kong people could choose to live and work on the mainland without any restriction. We don't need special permits, work permits, and things like that. Doesn't apply to mainland residents who want to come and work or live in Hong Kong. It'll be very interesting to watch the flow of Hong Kong people into the mainland as and when the bridge is open, when the new border crossing is open, when the high-speed train is running. Particularly bearing in mind, I mean, this is where land economy comes in, bearing in mind the price differential and the price gradient between Hong Kong and the mainland. Now, the Hong Kong end of the bridge, real estate prices are much higher. What you pay to buy 1 square foot, the Hong Kong end of the bridge, you get 7 square feet at the other end. Now, this is the differential in gradient. What might happen, I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball. It would be very interesting to watch. A year hence, 2 years hence, 3 years hence. Already we're seeing many of our retired, perfectly able-bodied friends who have sold their flat in Hong Kong, moved to Zhongshan, the other end of the bridge, in anticipation, comes back pretty regularly, once a week, twice a week. And where do they sleep at night when they spend time overnight in Hong Kong? They book a hotel room. Makes perfect financial and social sense. Now, whether that's going to spread, we don't know. We'll watch. Now, on the question of communications to Hong Kong people, sharing with Hong Kong people the facts, the views, and the questions, and so on and so forth. Very, very good question. It's terribly, terribly important. I describe the sort of things that we do with the mainland, between Hong Kong and the mainland, as internal diplomacy. Internal diplomacy. It's not diplomacy because we are two parts of the same country. But then unlike other pairs of cities in other countries, we have the one country, two systems arrangement with a high degree of autonomy on our side. And therefore, I call this not diplomacy, but internal diplomacy. It's terribly important for us to bear in mind the needs of internal diplomacy. Sir Percy Craddock, British ambassador to China, and he was in charge of negotiation between Britain and China over the future of Hong Kong, and they became foreign affairs advisor to Prime Minister Thatcher and Prime Minister John Major. Thank you. He wrote a book, Experiences of China. It's an old hand. And he said in diplomacy, he always talk about internal diplomacy, but the same principle applies. He said in diplomacy, it's the home side that you worry about, and not so much the other side. Same thing in internal diplomacy. With all these great things going on, Belt and Road, GBA, is the home side that we worry about. Make sure that we communicate fully, clearly, and properly with the Hong Kong people.
I have time for one more question.
I guess on that, over the last couple of days, we've talked a lot about measuring impact, measuring the impact that we do in our communities. And I guess in terms of moving forward, that'd be something that would be good to take back in the way in which you set your KPIs and how you actually measure that impact, which goes beyond just GDP growth per capita, increased land pricing, affordability, but it actually gets into the social side, into sustainability, how you redistribute energy within this region, like those kind of KPIs. It would be interesting in terms of how you would set that and measure that over the next 10 years to really show positive impact that's beyond just economics. So that's something in terms of, I think, taking back from what Urban Land Institute really focuses on in terms of measuring that impact.
You have to take that back to Beijing.
One of the biggest constraints on our social and economic developments, speaking as Hong Kong people, is shortage of developable land. GBA cities on the other side of the boundary, particularly on the west bank of the Delta, has much more land to offer. So not exactly as KPIs and not definitely not in numeric terms, but one could envision the possibility of Hong Kong people having more affordable and more decent housing, living on the other side, either as a retiree or if you're one of the 40,000 workers working around the airport, living on the other side of the bridge and coming to the Hong Kong airport to work, for example. And hopefully better quality education as well. Already a number of private schools are being established in and around Zhongshan and Zhuhai, again taking advantage of the land resource that they have that we don't have in Hong Kong and so on. One could go on, but I agree one shouldn't fix one's eyes simply and purely on economic development and GDP growth. There are a lot of social benefits to be had. I have been talking actively to people from outside of Hong Kong. We try to learn something from them as to how we run better and much better old people's homes for various categories of elderly people on the mainland, in the mainland GBA cities, instead of having them sort of squeezed into small institutions in Hong Kong.
All right. I need to close this session. We ran out of time. But Mr. Siwan Leung, Dr. Vincent Lo, thank you for your insight. Very, very well done.